What's up guys, my name's Brandon, and if your battery is struggling on iOS 17, I'm going to share more than 35 tips and tricks that will help you actually save battery life on iOS 17 and beyond. Alright, so let's kick things off with offline maps. So offline maps are going to help you save battery life since your map does not need to be constantly refreshing and checking for things like live traffic data or crashes along the route. So to download an offline map, just go to your Maps application and tap on your profile picture up in the top right, and then go to offline maps, and from here go to download new map and then search for wherever you want to download that new map for. So I'll just do Sonoma, and we can crop in right here on the exact location we want to download, and then just simply tap on download and it will begin downloading it right there, and you can use it without having to constantly refresh your Maps application and use all of that data, which is going to lead to a battery drain. And then you also have some additional settings down here, and this one, only use offline maps, is an important one. That way you will only use offline maps when in the Maps application, even if you have an internet connection. So that's an important toggle to turn on if you're trying to only use offline maps and really stretch out your battery life if you're on like a road trip or you're somewhere where you need to save battery life. Now, if you have an iPhone 15 series and you go into the battery section and then to battery health and charging, you will have a new option here under charging optimization for 80% limit. And what this does is it simply charges your iPhone only up to 80%. So if you only use 80% or less of your battery life in a day, it's a very good idea to have this enabled to help preserve your battery health over time. However, if you use more than 80% of your battery in any given day, I would recommend just keeping this on optimized battery charging. Now, something else I want to mention related to the iPhone 15 series is to be wary of using external USB-C accessories for long periods of time. So if you go into your battery section right here, you will see that there is now a section for USB-C accessories. And I found that these can actually eat up your battery life quite a bit. I mean, take a look at the usage there compared to everything around it. Only 1 hour took up, 4% of my battery life, whereas everything else was at least double that. So just keep in mind that using USB-C accessories for a long period of time, even just an hour, could weigh heavy on your battery life. Now, we also need to talk about live activities, because live activities are fun, they're cool, but they can drain battery life. And there's a specific setting that you might want to consider looking at to reduce the amount of battery drain with live activities. And that is if you go into your settings, and let's go to an application that might have live activities. So for this example, we'll go into sports alerts because I know I have live activities there. You will notice that we have our live activities toggle. If you go into that, you want to turn off the update rate of being more frequent. So you do not want more frequent updates with live activities if you want to get the most out of your battery life. And this is one that I would recommend pretty much everybody to disable, unless we're talking about something like Flighty, where you need to know the time that your plane is taking off or the time that boarding begins. The update rate for most things, I would recommend turning off for more frequent updates, especially because you're not sitting there looking at your live activity every single second. So that is a setting I would turn off. And unfortunately, you cannot turn it off overall system-wide. You do need to go into every application and turn it off manually. By the way, if you want a written PDF guide for these battery saving tips, that is available now for premium members, and you can find details and join with the first link in the description below. The next tip is to limit the amount of third-party widgets on both your home screen and on your lock screen. So even this fantastical widget here, which I love for the calendar, I've noticed that even this can drain battery life. So I don't think it's going to be just like 1 or 2 widgets, but if you have like 3, 4, 5 third-party widgets on your home screen, you're probably going to start to notice some battery drain. And this goes for the lock screen as well. You can see I have a couple of widgets here. I've noticed that the lock screen widgets don't make that big of a difference in terms of battery life, but I've noticed that on the home screen they do. So just limit your third-party widget usage. I've not found any issues with using first-party widgets, no matter how many I have on the screen. The next tip is to use Spotlight Search instead of opening up settings or opening up applications. For example, one of my classics is just to use the Spotlight Search for calculations. Like if I wanted to calculate this right here, I could see the result right there without having to open up the calculator application. That saves time and also saves energy. Now we can do the same thing if we type in like settings, for example. We can see I have different toggles here in iOS 17 to toggle on certain things in my settings. That way I don't need to go into the settings app and kind of jumble my way around and try to find where these settings are inside of the settings application, like night shift, true tone, always on display. I can search for those and change them from the Spotlight Search. Now, speaking of the Spotlight Search, you do also want want to monitor what's actually showing in the spotlight search and limit that. So if you go into your settings and then go down to Siri and search, and then scroll down until you see content from Apple and suggestions from Apple, and then also all these applications. So you can monitor what is actually shown in the spotlight search right here. Me personally, I keep all these enabled. I haven't noticed a big difference in spotlight search like some people have, but you can turn this off as well on a per app basis if you do not want this showing up in that spotlight search. Now, I did also want to mention the always on display because I've noticed a big difference over the past year, especially with this feature. So if you go into your settings, and this applies only to devices with the always on display capability, the 120 hertz devices, so just the pros at this point in time. But if you go to your settings, display and brightness, and then go down to always on display, I would recommend having show wallpaper disabled. So that is enabled by default, and show notifications also is enabled. You can keep that on or off, it's up to you, but I think the wallpaper is the main one I noticed, kind of drains battery a little bit if you have that enabled. So I keep that one disabled, and I've noticed a difference in my battery life. And then speaking of that OLED display, I would recommend having dark mode on, at least on automatic. So like if you go into your settings and go to display and brightness, I would recommend at least having this set to automatic, if not just being in dark mode all the time, because that will save your battery life. Of course, I have it in light mode because it's better for the camera and for you guys to see my phone, but dark mode is great because of course OLED displays do not use power to power those black pixels. They don't require any battery usage. So that is nice. And also you might want to recommend having, or I would recommend having, a dark wallpaper as well. If you have like a black wallpaper plus dark mode on an OLED display, you're going to be sitting pretty with your battery life. The next one has to do with a new iOS 17 feature that's really helpful for some people, but if you have this enabled and you don't really get a lot of use out of it, you want to disable this because this will absolutely drain your battery life. And if you go into settings, go to screen time, and then down here to screen distance. This feature right here is brand new in iOS 17, and it monitors how close you are to the screen, and it kind of just gives you alerts and reminds you not to get too close to reduce eye strain if you want to reduce the amount of eye strain. So I've had this enabled for a while, and I did notice that it did drain my battery life. So if you're not at risk for myopia, like especially if you have this on a child's device, if you have this enabled, it's fine on there. But for your personal device, I would recommend probably turning this off and just trying to keep a mental note to stay far away from the screen because this can cause battery drain. Now heading back into our settings, if we go back into Siri and search and then go up top to listen for, you might want to consider turning off the new iOS 17 feature where you don't have to say the phrase, "Hey Siri," you can just say Siri. So to do that, just go to "Hey Siri" instead of the top option right there. Or if you just don't want your device to listen for anything at all, you could just turn that off. The next thing you might want to do to get the most out of your battery life in iOS 17 is to consider replacing location sharing. Like if you share your location with somebody via the Find My application, you might want to consider just turning that off altogether and just using the new check-in feature in iOS 17. So if you go into messages and you tap on the plus and then go down, you will see that we have this yellow check mark here, which is the new check-in feature. And this allows you to share location with a person to make sure they get from point A to point B, and that's it. You don't need to share location for a set amount of time in the Find My app or anything like that, which that does impact your battery life more than something like a check-in would. And this is what it looks like when you check in with somebody. You see the little prompt there, and also it says you'll be notified when they arrive along with their ETA. The next one is a big one, and it's one that I see 95% of people get wrong on their device, and the reason that their battery life doesn't last as long as it should. And this one is simple. It's just disabling notifications from applications you do not need notifications from. Like for example, I see people all the time that get notifications from their Photos app about a memory, or from their mail talking about a new email they got from Burlington Coat Factory about a sale. Like that kind of stuff just drains your battery life, and it's just simply not necessary. There's a quick and easy way to just disable notifications from all applications except for the ones you care about. Now you can manually do this. Like if you go into your settings and then go into notifications, you can go into each one of these and turn them off, but there's an easier way to do that, and it's through the focus mode. So just go into focus modes and create a new one, or just edit like the do not disturb one right here. And up top, you'll see allow notifications. All you need to do is tap on the apps section and now just add the applications you want notifications from. Keep it on default, and all you have to do is add in the applications you actually want and you actually actually care about to get notifications from. That way, every other app that you don't care about, you do not get those pointless notifications from that will drain your battery life over the long term. And while we're talking about notifications, I want to talk about the scheduled summary. I talked about this last year, how this is the most underrated feature on iOS, and I still feel like it's one of the most underrated features in general. And if you go into your notification settings and then to scheduled summary, this is where you can set this up. And this is meant for applications where you may not want like a push notification for. It's not important enough to get a push notification throughout the day, but you would still like to get notifications from that application at least once per day. Here's where you can set that up at. So basically all you do is set a time where you want to receive notifications from a group of applications. Like for example, you can see here, I have a predetermined applications here, a couple of predetermined applications that I want to get just 2 notifications from throughout the day at 8 and 8:15 p.m. Obviously, you'll set those up to be further apart, or you'll just have one. So let's just do one actually. So I only want one notification from these applications at, let's just say, 8 p.m. Now at 8 p.m., I'll get one single notification. You know, they could have multiple notifications within that one, but one bubble from each of these applications. That way I'm not getting push alerts throughout the day, and I just get them in this one scheduled summary, which you can see this is what it looks like right here. It's just one bubble on your notification center. If you tap on that, it opens up like this, and you can see all the notifications that you got throughout the day, but they didn't show up for you until your summary. Now, the next one has to do with heat, because this is the #1 enemy of lithium-ion batteries. And I talked about this on Twitter or X. I made a very lengthy post about this, so if you're not following me over there, you might want to follow for more tips like this. But keeping your device away from heat is going to make a massive difference in your battery life. Like if you're in a truck, if you're in a work truck every day and your phone is just getting so hot that you're getting the temperature alert, you know, if your phone's dying really fast every single day because you're in just such extreme heat, that is absolutely crushing your battery life, not just for the day, but also the longevity of your battery life. Your battery health is in shambles if that's what you go through on a daily basis. So just try to keep your phone away from heat as much as possible. And again, I shared a lot of tips here on Twitter or X, and I think the main one I can say, especially if you're traveling like in a car, is just put your phone up to an AC vent. Even something so small like that can make a big difference. And also just really trying to reduce the amount of wireless charging that you do. Like don't use your phone while you're wirelessly charging. Don't even use your phone while it's charging at all. I found that also can lead to extreme heat on your device, which again, even if it's not impacting the battery life at the time, that does impact your battery capacity, your battery health in the long term. Now, the next tip goes hand in hand with the previous one, and that is to avoid letting your phone go below 20%, and especially avoid your phone dying. Do not let your phone die. This is just one of the worst things you could do for the overall battery health. Like you'll notice that when you go below 20% on your phone, it starts to heat up a little bit more. If you feel the back, you'll notice it starts to heat up a little bit more, and that's bad for the battery. The next tip is to use Wi-Fi any time possible instead of cellular. So I can't tell you how many times I've gotten people's phones just to, you know, write something down or check something on their phone, and I see that when they're in a house with Wi-Fi, even their own house, they're for some reason using cellular. There's no reason for that. So I would recommend having Wi-Fi always turned on when you can, always connect to Wi-Fi when you can, because obviously using cellular is going to cause more battery usage. There's more energy used in trying to find the correct, you know, tower to get signal from. So use Wi-Fi when you can. Now, something else you can do to save battery life on iOS 17 is disable haptics and vibration. So if you go into your settings and to sounds and haptics, and then down here under haptics, you will notice that you can now change when you want haptics to play. Do you want them to always play? Do you want them to only play in silent mode or not play in silent mode? Or do you want your haptics to always be off when you receive a notification or a phone call? Now, of course, when you do have haptics on, that is going to lead to more battery usage. That is expected because you are vibrating. You know, the inside of your device is vibrating a little bit. So that is one thing to keep in mind. Now, you can also turn vibrations off as a whole. If you don't want any type of vibrations, you can turn that off as well. And that is under accessibility. And then to touch, and then down here, you will see that we have an option for vibration where you can turn all vibrations on your device off. So I think it's a good idea to have these off if you do have an Apple Watch on your wrist. That way you always feel the vibrations on your wrist and you don't need the added vibration on your phone. However, if you do not have an Apple Watch, it's probably a good idea to leave vibrations on. That way you can know when you get a notification or a phone call if your device is in your pocket. Now this next one is pretty controversial and there's a lot of opinions on this, but if you go into your settings and then to accessibility and then to display and text size and go all the way down to the bottom, we have auto brightness. Now, you may have to play around with this for yourself to see what's better for you and what eats up the most battery life for you, but I've noticed that auto brightness does not impact battery life as much as it used to. Now, me personally, in my own testing, I find that having auto brightness turned on actually saves battery life, and having it turned off is what reduces my battery life. So if you want to save battery life the most, turn this toggle on. I have it off on this device, again, just for the camera, but this is something you might have to play around with. Everybody has a different opinion on that, but I find it to be enabled is best for my battery life. And by the way, just another little bonus tip I'll throw in because it's right here. If you have reduced white point turned on, this will really lower the brightness of your phone. And especially if you're like in dark mode and at night, if your phone is still too bright, you could turn on reduce white point and make this go all the way up to like 100%. You can see how dark your phone gets. So if your phone is still too bright at night, I would recommend turning on reduce white points. And that could also help you save battery life in a pinch. Like if you're really low on battery life, you could turn this on, in combination with being in the lowest brightness setting. Like even right now, I'm still high up on my brightness. If you turn that brightness all the way down and also turn reduce white point up, you're barely going to be able to see the screen. And that could be good for, making your battery last longer. The next tip has to do with location services. And this is a little bit more of a tedious process. It's not like notifications, but if you go into your settings and go to privacy and security and then to location services, you're going to want to toggle off a lot of things in these applications that you may have toggled on beforehand when you weren't really paying attention. Like a lot of times people just click whatever when they get into an application to allow it to use their location, but you may not want that. So you may want to go through here and just toggle off the location for some applications. Like for example, Uber Eats on this device, I don't use it. So I'm going to turn off my precise location and I'm going to turn off location access. It does not need my location because on this device, I don't use Uber Eats. So just go in here and look at the ones that say while shared or while using and consider turning those off and turn them to never use your location. And then also if you go down to the system services section, you will notice a few system services here as well. You want to consider turning these off, especially things like setting time zone. For example, if you're not traveling anytime soon, you want to turn off setting time zone because obviously your time's not going to change in your area. You might want to turn off things like, compass calibration. You don't really need to calibrate your compass very often. So just things in here you might want to look at, and also significant locations, you might want to turn that off as well. What significant locations does is basically just track every move you make to make more accurate suggestions for what you're going to do at a future time. I find it to be pretty useful, honestly, at most points, and that's why I have it enabled on my main device, but a lot of people don't like this for the simple fact of it breaching privacy for some people, and also for the fact that it does eat up your battery life. Oh, and also these product improvement toggles, I would recommend turning all of these off. Now this next one has to do with a feature that came back in iOS 17, but it's not necessarily one that you want to have enabled, and that is an animated lock screen with a live photo. So if I go to this one, you can see it's set to live photo, and I go onto it, you can see that it kind of moves the background, and every time I lock or unlock my device, you can see it kind of moves right there, which is pretty cool. It's a cool little animation, but the amount of times you unlock your device every day, that's probably going to drain your battery at least a little bit. Maybe not drain, but it will impact your battery life. So as cool as these are, I would recommend if you're trying to get the most out of your battery life, just do not have a live wallpaper or a live photo as your lock screen photo. Speaking of animations, if we go into our settings and go to accessibility and then into motion, we have reduce motion up top. And this is something you want to enable if you do not care for the parallax effect on the icons on your home screen. So that is something to consider. And then also down here, we have limit frame rate. And if you have a 120 hertz device, like a Pro iPhone, you might want to turn this on to limit that frame rate to 60 frames per second. Oh, and another feature I forgot to mention in the display and brightness section is right here underneath of the auto lock feature, which we talked about a minute ago, and that is raise to wake. This is something I would personally recommend having turned off. This is enabled by default, and what this does is it will just wake up your device when you do like this, when you have it down and prop it up and look at your face. So that's cool and all, but I've had so many false triggers with this that I just keep this disabled. Now this next one is something I still see so many people doing for some reason, and that is blasting music at full volume on your iPhone. I just simply do not get this. When you play music on the iPhone speakers at full volume, that is going to eat away at your battery life. Not only is your phone going to get hot, but it's going to damage the speakers, and it's just going to lead to just a bad user experience in general and for the future of your iPhone. So if you're going to turn your volume up to max, just get an external speaker, get a Bluetooth speaker, or just put in headphones. The next one is a classic one that Apple themselves have always said is the biggest reason for battery drain on the iPhone, and that is background app refresh. If you go into your general settings and to background app refresh, you obviously want this to be on for some applications, but you can see here, I have this disabled for quite a few applications. So if you do not want your apps refreshing in the background, turn them off right here. Like you can see certain things like ad block or books, applications like that do not need to be refreshed in the background. Even most social media apps probably don't need to be updated in the background. So just go through here and toggle off any application that you do not need background app refresh turned on for. Now I need to get my main device for this next one, but if we go into our settings and then go to cellular and then go all the way down to the bottom, you will notice that we have a toggle called Wi-Fi Assist. I would recommend having this disabled. Turn this off because what this does is it automatically uses cellular data when your Wi-Fi connectivity is poor. And remember, the thing I said earlier, the tip I gave earlier, is that you always want to use Wi-Fi over cellular. So if your Wi-Fi is weak, even when your Wi-Fi is weak and it's, kind of hanging on by a thread, but you're still using it, that's not going to drain as much battery as cellular in the same case. Like if your cell signal is weak and you're trying to still, load web pages, your battery is going to take a massive hit. So I would recommend having this turned off. If your Wi-Fi is bad, just wait it out until it gets better, or just turn off Wi-Fi altogether and just use cellular. I would recommend having Wi-Fi Assist off. And also while you're at it, turn off iCloud Drive and iCloud Backup in cellular. You don't want these backing up your data while you're on a cellular connection. Save that for Wi-Fi. Now the next one is another classic, and I kind of hinted at this earlier, but it has to do with the mail application. So if you go into your mail settings and go to your accounts and then go to fetch new data, I would recommend having push turned off and fetch set to manually. So push, it says new data will be pushed to your iPhone from the server when possible. That means it's always checking for new mail and it's going to push that no matter what. I would recommend having that turned off. And also for fetch, you can change this to like hourly or something like that, but I just find that manually is the best. Like if I want to see my new emails, I'm just going to simply go into my mail application and then it's going to load up my new emails. I don't need it being fetched and pushed to me because that will 100% drain battery life. Now I will say that you can change this on a per account basis. So like if you have obviously a work email and you really do need to see every single email you get, you can change that in here if you go to this right here. Like if I go to manual for this, it's going to check only manual for my Gmail. But let's just say like iCloud is my business account. I'm going to have that set to push. But keep in mind, you do need the big push kill switch turned on in order for one of these that you have set to push to work properly. Now, the next tip has to do with storage. So if you go into your settings and go to general and then to iPhone storage, you'll notice in iOS 17, we have a new look here. So up here, it looks a little bit different. And then also we can now filter our applications here as well by size. You can filter it by name or last used date. Now, obviously you want to keep it on size so you can see what is eating up the most of your storage. Now, the tip here is to always have enough storage remaining. So, when you have low storage, like if I had like 250 out of 256 gigs used, my phone would lag. And when you lag, that leads to battery heat. And what is the number one enemy of, the batteries? It's heat. So your battery is going to drain like crazy if you do not have a lot of storage available on your iPhone. So if you have a 128 gigabyte device, you should not be having 100 gigabytes out of that 128. Like you need to delete some things. So I would recommend having like at least 25% of your overall storage free. That way you don't have any issues with lag on your device. Also in this section, we have low power mode. And this is a feature that everybody should know about by now, but you want to take advantage of low power mode and potentially turn this on automatically at a set percent that's not just 20%. So if you go into your shortcuts right here and go to automations and then tap on the plus in the top right hand corner, and we want to go down to battery level, and you want your battery level, you're going to set this to whatever you want low power mode to be automatically triggered at. So if we go to, let's just say falls below 50%, for example, we'll use the default here. We're going to set that. So you can of course change it right here, but we're going to go to 50% and then do run immediately and then tap on next. And now we're going to search for low power mode. So set low power mode, and now it's going to turn low power mode on when my battery level falls below 50%. Now I don't have to worry about manually turning on low power mode, and of course we could always disable this right here as well. You could set this turn to don't run if you want that to be disabled. But of course low power mode is good because it does reduce the background activity like downloads and mail fetch until you can fully charge your phone. And of course it does impact other things as well. That leads to better battery life in general. Now the next tip is to pay attention and study the battery chart. This is in here for a reason. If you go into your settings and to battery, you have your battery chart right here. Now the last 24 hours is pretty useful. You can tap on this and kind of see what was using the most of your battery life during that set hour. But I think over the last 10 days, like if you look at the past 10 days, this really shows you trends as to what is using the most of your battery life on a daily basis. So just look at this, especially in the last 24 hours. If you see like a little drop off, like if you see right there, there's a little drop off, I can go to this section specifically and see that home and lock screen for whatever reason at that time led to that little dip right there. So just pay attention to that and just monitor this battery chart. And then the final thing I want to mention about battery life in iOS 17 is to simply not obsess over battery life and do not check it nonstop. This is the number one thing that I see so many people doing. They care so much. They pay attention to their battery life at all times throughout the day. If you do that, you're not going to get good battery life because you're just obsessing over it and worrying about it. Stop that. If you need to, go into your settings and go to battery and simply turn off the battery percentage. That could be good for your mental health and just for not obsessing over it, because when you don't see a number right there, I don't know what it is, but in our head, we don't associate, when that goes down with numbers. Like, I don't know what it is, but it doesn't seem as drastic when we have battery percentage turned off. So consider turning that off if you're somebody who does obsess over the battery life on a daily basis. So there you have it. Those are about 35 tips and tricks to get the most out of your battery life and extend your battery life as much as possible here in iOS 17. If you want to see more iOS 17 videos, check out the cards in the description down below. I have a lot of coverage on iOS 17. But anyways, hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would appreciate if you gave it a thumbs up. Also subscribe for more future iOS 17 and just iPhone tips and tricks videos in general. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.